So do you think this is a good sign for socially anxious individuals, or does it reinforce their fear and avoidance of real life interactions?
Oh yeah, I think it's a bad thing. I think there definitely needs to be more control. There needs to be more influence, ultimately from parents, uh, just as guilty by the ways.
Hmm.
And at the end of the day, that's the sad part. That if we get to a point where we recognize that as a society and make choices, I think it very well could be a little bit of too little, too late. But it will be interesting to see this particular generation from those who are around, I'll say 23 and under. It'll be interesting as they get married, as kids who are 12, 20 years from now get married, have their kids. It will be interesting to see if there'll be shifts or change, even within legislation, within what is allowed, what's not allowed. I don't know.
Yes.
Time will tell. So the futurist in me is going probably not, but because most people don't even know how to parent their own kids, let alone deal with social media on top of it.
Yes.
You
Yes.
know, yeah, it's too good of a babysitter these days.
That's very true. Um, what does this excessive social media prevalence mean for peer-to-peer interaction, as it is and as it will evolve in the future? Like you just mentioned, like physical interaction, and like what do you see for that as it is and how it will evolve in the future?
Yeah, I think we'll see both positive and negative.
Uh-huh.
Uh, I, I'm reminded of, actually, there's a book by a guy called Arthur C. Clarke. It's called 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Uh-huh.
He himself was a futurist. The book was written, I think, in 69, 68, or something like that. And it's interesting. In that book, he actually futurized um, communication. Now, in that day, it was the tele or the telephone and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
he envisioned a time where everyone could see each other like this, but from a phone standpoint. What
Mm-hmm.
he didn't see was how it would change. And so those are some of the interesting things. So yeah, if I have a loved one that I grew up with, or if I have to, let's say, go to Saskatchewan, the middle of nowhere, and do a conference, the advantage is I can still call my loved ones and go, hey, how are you doing? And at least have some form of facial rather than just verbal. Or the old, even before that, it was the letter, dearest Gwyneth, I miss thee thou,
Mm-hmm.
those kind of situations,
Yeah.
and that's better than nothing. But for some, this is better than even a letter and stuff like that. But it is interesting when you also look back at just the letter days, how influential one single letter could be for a family or an individual,
Of
rather
course.
than just constant, whenever I can get it, if I can get it, connection and stuff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
That's very true. Um, you have sort of touched upon it before, but I would somehow ask you this again. Like,
Sure.
could excessive social media usage be considered an addiction? If yes, how?
Yeah, it's an addiction if the person is unable to close the screen, walk away from it. If the person is being influenced by other individuals or social media to do actions that are not of their own choice of what they would do if they really wanted, if they really had time to think about it, such as cyberbullying, such as, hey man, everyone's doing this cool new thing. What's the newest thing? Well, it's not new anymore, but it was the whole hold your breath and push someone against the wall, and basically cause them to be unconscious or something like that.
Oh,
You
okay.
know, thanks to social media, thousands of schools are now having to ban even the mention of that practice because kids are doing it. Whether it's cool or not cool, it is extremely unsafe. It causes brain hemorrhaging, can cause brain hemorrhaging and brain damage. But
Mm-hmm.
because of the coolness of social media, we've had it happen already, and it never would have happened if we hadn't have had social media. You
Of course.
know, flip side of the coin too. Consequentially, I deal with after ramifications of people
Yeah.
who do too much social media.
Uh-huh.
I had an emotional affair on my husband, my wife, pornography, not able to let it go. It's beyond just social media. It can create stalking. I use Facebook or different sites, different social media sites can be utilized as what I call a seeking out behavior. So if I'm thinking of possibly whatever it is, it can create a seeking out behavior where no, I'm not watching pornography. Yeah, but you happen to be seeing if you're, that girl from high school is in a swimsuit or not. That's seeking behavior. That's not healthy. So it doesn't help in that way.
Of course. No.
Yeah, and I would call that an addiction then, if
Yes,
you're not able to let it go.
of course. So, keeping our discussion in mind, do you think it is possible for a young person to cut ties with social media, especially if their mental health is being affected? Please elaborate on that.
I would love to say yes, but the
Hmm.
reality is right now that's not going to happen. So I believe that is where, in a utopian world, in a perfect world, that is the parent's responsibility to help guide and morally support them to know and recognize what should be watched, what shouldn't be watched, how much time is limit, how much time they're not on it, what are the limits, even as simple as when we're at the dinner table, no cell phones allowed. Put it on the counter. We're going to eat as a family for a half hour, even if we fight or don't fight, but
Yeah.
no social media, those kind of concepts. Not allowing your 12-year-old child to text their BFF at 2 p.m. in the morning or 2 a.m. in the morning.
Hmm.
What? No. Now, the flip side of that, if it's an issue of safety, absolutely. But those are rare and extreme cases that have to be utilized and understood. But
Of
that
course.
has to be done within checks and balances.
Of course. Of course.
Yeah.
Even the way you mentioned, like baby, like social media acting as a babysitter, right? Like children are literally growing up with them, like with an iPad in their hand. They refuse to eat without having an iPad screen in front of them.
Right.
It's like that's how children are being raised right now. So yeah, it's just it raises a lot of questions as to
Sure.
what's happening here. But yeah, look, I'll get back to the questions. Um,
Well, actually, I'm just going to interject on that
yeah,
because
please.
that is a good point.
Yes.
I would say it's just again, it's the consequences of those choices that have happened in parenting.
Mhm.
Nowadays, it's the tablet. I'm not going to eat if I don't have my tablet.
Yeah.
Well, it just means some parenting needs to happen. It's not about the kid. It's actually
Exactly.
about the parent now. Same thing happened when TV came into our world, whatever, 50, 60 years ago. Same thing happened when movies came onto screen 100 years ago. And so we've just seen different levels of complexity of that situation, but it's not new. It's just
Mhm.
more accessible.
Yes, exactly. That's the point. It's just in your face right now. Like it's very
Exactly.
much accessible. Everybody has access to it.
And it creates, again, isolation within
Exactly.
a social context.
It does. It does. So, what measures, in your professional opinion, can be taken to break the cycle of excessive social media usage in a bid to lessen or alleviate social anxiety? What
Yeah.
sort of measures can somebody take?
Yeah. I think easier said than done, obviously, but obviously it's always looking at the different directions. Parentally, the parent needs to, even beyond just banning social media at 11 a.m., it's teaching the reasons, the whys of the reasons how we're going to effectively do this. So the child knows what to do when they're encountering different situations. So there's an educational component. There's also demonstration. I mean, it's the typical parent who's like, son or daughter, get off your phone. Yeah, but mom, you've been on your phone for the last 4 hours.
Yeah.
Well, they are only going to imitate what they're seeing as well.
Yes.
Okay. I think schools have done the right thing, and I think they're still struggling and working through it from my observation. But good on them for, I know the school where my kids go to, there is unless it's an emergency, unless it's before or after school, you are not allowed on your cell phone. They have a policy. If we catch you with your phone, you get one warning, otherwise it's gone. Well, they haven't had any incidences yet, so that's enough to scare a kid. So guess what? It's not as bad as you think sometimes.
Uh-huh.
It's just the boundaries haven't been in there. Healthy boundaries are not
Yes.
put in place. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
think practically things like no texting while you drive are other areas that have helped out, but that leads to be further enforcement as well, um, to support things. It's amazing. Everyone knows about pornography, and yet there is no ban on it. It is unbelievable. You have to order it even on cable. You might occasionally see something on TV, but compared to what's out on the internet, it is out of control. Where's the ban? Where's the control on that? So that the 7-year-old is not accidentally popping on something. And just so you know, those who are on YouTube, I've been on stuff and it's like, what the heck? I thought this was, what's the parental? There's no parental control.
Yeah.
Now that's just a visual thing. That's not even talking about violence. That's not talking about areas of language. That's
Yeah.
not talking about emotional projection of attitudes that are influencing our culture. Oh my gosh. So we have to start at the root. Individually, what am I going to do about it? What do I need help with it as an individual? And how can I influence others, specifically, first and foremost, my family, and then my community, and so forth.
Yes. That's a very good answer. Yeah. Um, you touched upon it a little before, like, and it's again out of the blue here. But how much do you think that the fact that every internet post is permanent in some way or the other plays a part in the formation and or exacerbation of social anxiety in young people? Just the fact that once you post something online, it just stays there, right? Even if you delete it, it'll be there in some form or another. Like
Yeah.
somebody can screenshot it and it's there for the rest of eternity, for instance.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a terrible tragedy, especially when you understand, again, using teenagers
Hmm.
in development of with the lack of self-control and impulsively putting something that they're going to regret later on, the social and consequences of that later on in life can potentially be devastating, and so where's the legislation to protect minors from making mistakes like
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
To be able to go, no, we have to do that. But that's just the reality. Again, that's where parents have to, I don't even, and in some regards, I don't even think people realize or want to realize or admit how long permanently this stuff is. There's always an image or a secondary something elsewhere. But
Yes.
people don't know that. So it's out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
Oh, it's okay. I won't make it. Well, until our next prime minister someday decides to become a prime minister, and because of what they did when they were 17 or 21 comes out in social media, and
Yeah.
it's like, well, there's a smear campaign.
Yeah.
Next person we have to try to get into election,
Yes.
so
Exactly.
it's very unfortunate that way.
Yeah. So does this like again, does this like exacerbate social anxiety in people as well? Do
Yeah,
you think?
I would
Yeah.
say, yeah. And it's not even that, it exacerbates long-term social anxiety as well, because it's not that I'm going to you directly saying, you know what, I made a mistake, I'm sorry, let's move on, we reconcile, those kind of situations. Um, it's still there,
Hmm.
and it can haunt you. And it just makes the work I do in a person's life, it can create a little more of a lingering challenge to be able to deal with it. If someone dies, with all due respect, they're dead. Now, I will still support them with grief and loss, work through that stuff, whether it was issues of bitterness that they never, stuff they never reconciled. I wish I had said this to my dad, but I didn't.
Yeah.
Those kind of things. Or I loved my dad and man, I just miss him so much and I can't get over it. Okay, we'll work through that, but there's a finality in it. I'm finding it is easier, for example, using social media as an example, it's easier to counsel a family who has had a physical affair on their partner than someone who's had an emotional affair or a pornographic affair, as it were, because it's never done.
Yeah. Yep.
It's not concluded. All right, you did the act, you messed up, we're going to have to work through it. It hurt and it's still there. It might linger in the memory, I call it, but it's done. But man, that picture is there forever. So again, it's not that it's new, but the consequences are becoming more rampant and it's more available to people, unlike where we just focused on politicians 40, 50 years ago with the snapshot of
Yeah.
the senator with the bad girl,
Yeah.
those kind of things. Now it's just, I mean, that's the whole thing with, what was that called? It's the Have an Affair site. Oh, I'm blanking out on the name, but it creates emotional affairs. which have longer, more difficult consequences to bring healing of in the work I do, is what I'm trying to say. So,
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
yeah.
That's very interesting. Yeah. So, like, this brings me to my last question
Okay.
for this interview, which is like, in today's world where social media is so deeply integrated in young people's lives, is it practical to idealize a life without it, or learn to live better with social media?
Again, from a neutral social media, being a neutral perspective, it's here to stay. It's not going anywhere. We wouldn't be able to do what we're doing today without it.
Yes,
But mind you, without it, you wouldn't have your topic either for your thesis, right?
that's
There's
true.
the bitter irony.
Yeah, that's true.
There's
That's
your
true.
thesis title, bitter irony,
That's
but at
great.
the end of the, yeah. So again, we can use it, but we are now legitimately not just thinking of it, knowing it, but ignoring it. We're now actually seeing the consequences of social anxiety within our young people today regarding the issues specifically with social media in your case. And so definitely we have to make positive changes. We have to make influence for change that will affect our generation and the generations to come in order to create a healthy lifestyle that does not control our life, but enhances our life. But as always, way easier said than done.
Thank you. That's great.
Yeah.
So again, like, thank you for your time, taking out time and like talking to me. It's
You
again,
bet.
it's very, it's invaluable information, really. So thank
Oh,
you.
good. I'm glad I could help. Glad
Yeah.
I could help. All right, Mohammed, all the best to you and your thesis and your projects upcoming,
Thank you.
okay?
Thank you. Yeah.
You're
You have to
welcome.
take care of yourself. Yeah.
Thank you. Take care.
Goodbye.
All right. Bye.